Christmas had always been bittersweet for me. But this year, I was determined to make it special. My name is Emily Carter, and at 34, I had spent most of my adult life balancing between my demanding career as a corporate attorney and my complicated family dynamics. For as long as I could remember, my younger sister, Alice, had always been the center of my parents' world. While I had worked tirelessly to build my career and ensure financial stability, Alice had floated through life without responsibilities, jumping from failed ventures to expensive retreats, all bankrolled by my parents. But I had made peace with it, or at least I thought I had. This Christmas, Alice had convinced my parents to let her host the family gathering at her new townhouse, a place she had barely lived in, but had decorated like a Pinterest dream, thanks to their financial support. I had offered to help plan, but as usual, my suggestions were brushed aside. Then, 3 days before Christmas, I received a message from my mother. "Emily, there's an ice storm coming, so we're canceling Christmas dinner. Everyone's staying home for safety. Stay warm, honey." I sighed in disappointment but didn't question it. Winter storms weren't uncommon in upstate New York, and I could understand wanting to keep everyone safe. So, I settled in for what I assumed would be a quiet, uneventful holiday. By noon on Christmas Day, I had embraced my unexpected solo holiday. A hot cup of cocoa, a cozy blanket, and a classic Christmas movie. It wasn't the gathering I had envisioned, but it was peaceful. Then, at around 3 p.m., I absent-mindedly opened Instagram, and my world shattered. There, at the top of my feed, was a post from my cousin Lauren. "Merry Christmas from our family to yours. So grateful to be surrounded by love and tradition." Attached was a picture of my entire family, gathered at Alice's house, laughing, eating, and celebrating together. Everyone was there. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, even my grandmother, who I had been told wasn't feeling well enough to host this year. Everyone except me. Through the large windows in the background, I could see clear blue skies. No ice storm, no bad weather, just a perfect winter day. I stared at my phone. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers scrolled through more photos, each one a dagger to my heart. There was my dad carving the turkey, my mom placing her signature Christmas cookies on the table, Alice looking effortlessly perfect, surrounded by relatives who had all conspired to exclude me. A nauseating mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak churned in my stomach. They had lied to me, not just about Christmas, but for years. I thought back to every canceled event, every time plans had mysteriously fallen through, every birthday, holiday, and dinner I had missed because I was too busy with work or not interested in family things, or so they had claimed. But the truth was painfully clear now. I hadn't been invited, and they had been lying to me for years to keep me from knowing the truth. My hands trembled as I gripped my phone. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had always rationalized their favoritism, always made excuses for why they treated Alice differently, but this was undeniable. This was a deliberate act of exclusion, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. At that moment, I knew one thing for certain. I was done being the afterthought. I was done fighting for a place in a family that clearly didn't want me there. And whether they realized it or not, they had just lost the one person who had always been there for them. But they didn't know what was coming next. My hands trembled as I put my phone down. How could they do this to me? For years, I had ignored the warning signs, dismissed the small betrayals, and convinced myself that I was imagining things. I had spent holidays alone, birthdays with just a short phone call, and always assumed my family was just too busy. But now, seeing those pictures, the truth hit me like a train. This wasn't the first time. They had done this before, probably for years. How many canceled events were just coordinated lies to keep me from knowing I wasn't welcome? How many family gatherings had I missed while they laughed behind my back? I felt sick. The betrayal ran deeper than just this one Christmas. It was a pattern of deliberate exclusion, a secret they had all kept from me, a decision they had all made over and over again. And I had been too blind to see it, but not anymore. The next morning, my phone rang. I stared at the screen. Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. Hi, honey. Hope you had a nice, quiet Christmas. We missed you. Her voice was cheerful, almost too cheerful, as if nothing had happened. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to keep my voice steady, calm, composed, controlled. Really? I asked. Because from what I saw, it looks like you all had a wonderful time at Alice's house. Silence. A pause just long enough to tell me she had been caught. Oh, well, she stammered. It was a last-minute thing. You know how Alice likes to plan spontaneous get-togethers. We didn't think you'd want to drive in the storm. I laughed coldly. What storm, Mom? The skies were clear. I saw the photos. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a sigh. The one she always used when she was about to lie again. Emily, you're overreacting. It's just, you don't always enjoy these things, and we didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. You're so busy with work, and you never seem interested in family gatherings. My stomach clenched. There it was. The excuse they had always used to justify leaving me out. I never seem interested, I repeated, my voice sharper now. Is that why I offered to help plan Christmas dinner? Is that why I showed up every year, only to be ignored while Alice played the perfect hostess? Honey, don't be dramatic. Dramatic. My voice rose. You made me spend Christmas alone. You lied to me. You coordinated a story so that I wouldn't come. How long has this been going on, Mom? How many times have you all done this to me? Another pause. Then she sighed again, her voice turning cold. Emily, you're making a big deal out of nothing. We love you, but you can be difficult at family gatherings. Alice just wanted everything to be perfect. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Perfect, I repeated. And I didn't fit into that perfect picture, did I? She didn't answer. That silence told me everything. I hung up before she could say anything else. I couldn't listen to another excuse. Not now. I needed to think. I sat down at my desk, opening my laptop, and started going through old messages, texts, and emails, searching for patterns I had ignored before. And there they were. Every time I had been told an event was canceled, I found evidence that it still happened. Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Canceled because Dad wasn't feeling well. But there was a Facebook post from Alice, a beautifully decorated dinner table, captioned "So grateful for family." My birthday last year. Mom had said everyone was too busy, but my cousin Lauren had posted a picture from the restaurant they went to without me. Even my grandmother's birthday party, one I had asked about twice, had still happened without me. They had done this to me again and again, and I had never questioned it. I was done. For years, I had bent over backward to be a good daughter, a good sister, a good family member. I had sent gifts, checked in, shown up, even when they barely acknowledged my existence. And for what? To be pushed aside, forgotten, treated like an inconvenience. Number not anymore. I had spent too long begging for scraps of their attention, hoping they would one day see me as worthy of being part of their world. I was done chasing after people who didn't want me there. I was done trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't belong. And whether they knew it or not, they had just lost me forever. But first, I was going to show them exactly what happens when you betray someone who has always been there for you. They had no idea what was coming next. I sat in my apartment, staring at the email draft on my screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my mind racing with 1,000 different emotions. Anger, betrayal, hurt. But most of all, clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to stay silent. I wasn't going to make excuses for them anymore. I wasn't going to let them pretend this didn't happen. They wanted to erase me from their lives. Fine. But I was going to make sure they knew exactly what they had done before I walked away for good. I took a deep breath and began typing. Subject: since you all missed me on Christmas. Dear family, I hope you had a wonderful time at Alice's house. From the pictures on social media, it looks like you all had an amazing Christmas dinner. The same dinner I was told was canceled due to an ice storm that never existed. I want you all to know that I see it now. All the last-minute cancellations. The oops, we forgot to tell you moments. The times I was left out while you all celebrated together. This isn't new, is it? This has been happening for years. I used to think it was just a mistake. That maybe I was too busy with work. Maybe I was too quiet. Maybe it was my fault. But it wasn't. You chose to exclude me over and over again. And instead of telling me the truth, you lied. I don't want an apology. I don't want excuses. I just want you to know that I see you for who you are now. And I will never make the mistake of thinking I belong in this family again. I won't be reaching out anymore. You won't have to cancel another event for me again. Consider this my final message to all of you. Best of luck keeping up the perfect image you've worked so hard to create. I attached the screenshots, Mom's text about the storm, the Instagram photos proving she had lied, and a few older receipts of similar canceled events that had never been canceled at all. Then, without hesitation, I hit send. A part of me expected immediate responses, angry texts, defensive calls, more gaslighting. But for the first few hours, nothing. And then my phone exploded. Mom called 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. Alice sent a 5-paragraph text explaining how I was ruining the family over one misunderstanding. My dad, normally the quiet one, sent a message pleading for me to be reasonable. But the real kicker, my aunt, the family's self-appointed peacemaker, sent this gem of a message. Emily, do you really want to do this? Families have disagreements, but you're blowing this out of proportion. Can't you just let it go? You're embarrassing your mother. She was just trying to spare your feelings. Spare my feelings. By making me spend Christmas alone. By making sure I felt unwanted, unseen, unimportant. I had to laugh at the irony. This wasn't about me ruining the family. This was about them being exposed. They didn't care about how I felt. They only cared that I had stopped playing along. By the next morning, Mom finally left a voicemail. I hesitated before playing it, unsure if I wanted to hear another round of guilt-tripping and manipulation. But something told me I needed to listen. Emily, I don't know what you want me to say. She sounded tired, not apologetic, just frustrated that she had to deal with this. You're making a big deal out of nothing. We thought it would be easier this way, but I see now that you took it the wrong way. I didn't want to hurt you. Alice didn't want to hurt you. But you're so sensitive about everything. I clenched my jaw. There it was. The classic gaslighting technique my mother had perfected over the years. You're the one pushing us away, Emily. You could have just talked to us about this instead of sending that nasty email. Now the whole family is upset. You've made Alice cry. Your father is furious. I just don't understand why you're doing this to us. I exhaled slowly. So that was it. Even after everything, even with proof staring them in the face, they still refused to take accountability. They still wanted to twist it into my fault. I deleted the voicemail and blocked her number. That night, I sat on my couch, a glass of wine in one hand, scrolling through my texts one last time. Not one single message had said, "I'm sorry." Not one. Just excuses, deflections, and attempts to make me feel guilty. I took a deep breath and typed out one last text. Not for them, but for me. I see now that I was never part of this family. I was just an afterthought. But that ends today. I don't need people who lie to me, exclude me, and then blame me when I call them out. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Goodbye. Then, with zero hesitation, I blocked every single one of them. I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time in my life, I wasn't holding on to hope that they would change. For the first time, I wasn't begging for a place in a family that never truly wanted me there. And as I sat there, in the quiet peace of my own apartment, I realized something important. I wasn't alone. I had myself, and that was enough. I woke up the next morning with a sense of unexpected calm. Blocking my family had been a long time coming, and for the first time in years, I felt free. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the end of it. People like them don't let go easily, and I was right. Later that afternoon, as I sat sipping coffee on my balcony, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. For a second, I debated ignoring it, but something told me to pick up. "Emily? It's Helen. I think you need to hear this." I froze. Helen was an old family friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Your parents have been talking. About you, about the money. My heart dropped. "What money?" I asked, gripping the phone tighter. Helen hesitated before sighing. "Emily, I don't know how to say this, but I think they stole from you. A lot." I felt my stomach churn as she continued. "Your grandfather left something behind for you. A trust fund. A large inheritance. Your parents. They told everyone you refused it, that you wanted to make your own way. But I don't think that's true, is it?" My blood ran cold. I had never refused anything. I had never even heard about an inheritance. And suddenly the puzzle pieces clicked together. The financial struggles. The times my parents let me pay their bills. The times they made me feel guilty for not giving enough. All while sitting on money that was meant for me. They had robbed me blind. The moment I hung up, I went into full investigation mode. I started digging through every legal document I could find, every old bank statement, every childhood record. Then, I made the smartest decision of my life. I hired a lawyer. Sarah Chen was a specialist in financial fraud and estate manipulation. Within days, she had accessed legal records my family never thought I would see. And what she found confirmed everything. My grandfather had left me a 6-figure inheritance, including stock investments and a trust fund. But instead of giving me access when I turned 25, my parents transferred it to Alice's name. funneling money into her business ventures and personal expenses. There were forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, and blatant theft. Everything was documented. Everything was undeniable. And I had proof. I could have gone straight to the police. I could have gone straight to court. But instead, I decided to do something better. I called a family meeting. This time, it wasn't on their terms. It was on mine. One last chance to face the truth. Saturday evening, my parents, Alice, and a few of our aunts arrived at my apartment. The moment they walked in, they acted like nothing had happened. "Emily," my mom cooed, "we're so glad you finally came to your senses." I stayed silent. My dad smiled. "We knew you'd come around." Alice smirked. "Are you ready to stop the drama now?" I clenched my jaw. They thought I had invited them to make amends. They had no idea what was coming. I gestured toward the folders neatly stacked on my dining table. "Before we talk, I suggest you all take a look at these." They exchanged confused glances before sitting down. One by one, they opened the folders. Inside were detailed records of the stolen inheritance, forged documents, and the bank transactions proving what they had done. My father's face paled. My mother's hands trembled. Alice's smirk disappeared. "Emily," my mother stammered, "I don't know where you got this, but it's clearly a misunderstanding." "No, Mother," I said coldly. "The only misunderstanding here is that you thought I'd never find out." The room fell into dead silence. "You stole from me." My voice was steady, but the rage burned beneath every word. "You took the money Grandpa left me and funneled it into Alice's lifestyle. You let me work myself to the bone while you sat on my inheritance." Alice shifted in her seat, her eyes darting toward Mom. "Mom, you said she knew." "She knew. She had been in on it." I exhaled sharply. "You used me. You watched me struggle. You made me feel guilty for not helping more, while you had money that was supposed to be mine." My father, still silent, grabbed his drink and downed it in one gulp. Mom was still scrambling for excuses. "We did it to protect you," she tried. "Protect me?" I scoffed. "Or protect Alice," Alice finally snapped. "You're making this into a bigger deal than it is. It was family money. Who cares who used it?" That was it. That was the moment I knew they would never take accountability. They didn't regret it. They only regretted getting caught. I leaned forward, staring Alice dead in the eye. "You stole my future, and now I'm going to take yours." I slid another document across the table. It was a legal settlement proposal. "You have 48 hours to return every cent, or I take this to court and press full criminal charges." Mom gasped. Dad looked like he was about to have a stroke. Alice laughed. "You wouldn't," she sneered. I smiled. "Watch me." And then, for the first time in my life, I watched them panic. I knew they wouldn't pay willingly. And sure enough, 48 hours passed. They did nothing. So, I filed charges. Fraud, embezzlement, financial exploitation. Within days, their assets were frozen. Alice's business, seized. My parents, under investigation. The family, in complete chaos. And me, I was finally free. They had spent their whole lives erasing me from the family. But now, I was erasing them from my life. For good. And I never looked back. It's funny how people act when they realize they can't control you anymore. When my parents and Alice saw that I wasn't bluffing, that I had actually filed legal charges against them, the panic set in. They had spent years manipulating, gaslighting, and keeping secrets. Now, their worst nightmare was coming true. Everyone was finding out the truth. By the end of the week, My lawyer, Sarah, had successfully frozen every account tied to the stolen inheritance. Alice's yoga studio, shut down. My parents' investments, seized. Their reputation, the thing they had worked so hard to maintain, shattered. And the best part? I wasn't the one who exposed them. They did it to themselves. As soon as my father realized he was under official investigation, he tried to spin the narrative, making calls to family friends, claiming I was an ungrateful daughter, trying to destroy the family over a misunderstanding. But no one was buying it. Because while my parents were scrambling to control the damage, my lawyer had already made sure the truth was documented in court records. And when those records became public information, my phone started buzzing, not with angry texts from my parents, but with apologies. One by one, relatives who had ignored my warnings, dismissed my feelings, or taken Alice's side suddenly wanted to talk. Emily, I just want to say, if I had known what they did to you, I never would have. Emily, I hope you know I never agreed with what they did. I just didn't want to get involved. Emily, can we talk? I want to explain. Explain why they stood by and said nothing. Explain why they only cared now that the truth was public. I ignored every single one of them. These were the same people who had dismissed me for years, who had called me too sensitive, who had believed my parents' lies without a second thought. I wasn't interested in their hollow apologies. I wasn't interested in their regret, now that their perfect image was ruined. I was done with them. I knew Alice wouldn't go down without a fight. She had spent her whole life getting whatever she wanted, off my back, off my money. And when she realized she was about to lose everything, she did what she always did. She played the victim. One morning, I woke up to find a long, dramatic message from her. Emily, please, I didn't know Mom and Dad stole your money. They told me it was theirs to give. I never meant to hurt you. I thought you had your own money. I thought you were happy. I didn't know. I rolled my eyes. She knew. She had always known. And now that she couldn't pretend anymore, she was begging for mercy. But I had none left to give. I typed my response carefully. Alice, you didn't care when I was struggling. You didn't care when I had to work twice as hard to pay for things that were already mine. You only care now because you got caught. You made your choice. Now, live with it. Then, I blocked her. 3 months later, I walked into the courthouse with my lawyer. My parents and Alice were already seated at the defense table, looking exhausted and bitter. Alice looked smaller than I had ever seen her. My mother, tear-streaked and furious. My father, completely silent. They thought I would back down before this moment. They thought I would cave. But I wasn't the same person they had manipulated for years. As the judge read the list of fraud charges, forgery, and financial abuse, my parents refused to look at me. The evidence was airtight. The money transfers, the altered legal documents, even emails between my parents and Alice, discussing how they were using my inheritance for her business. There was nothing they could do. And when the judge ruled in my favor, ordering full restitution plus damages, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Vindication. With their assets drained to pay me back, my parents were forced to sell their house and move into a small rental. Alice, unable to pay back her portion of the money, lost everything. Her car, her fake, glamorous lifestyle, and most of all, her reputation. People who had once admired her adventurous spirit now saw her for what she really was. A fraud. My parents. They tried to rebuild their image, but you can't recover from something like this. People don't forget, and I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for their approval. I wasn't seeking their love. I was free. And that was worth more than anything they had ever taken from me. A year after the lawsuit, I sat in my new home, sipping coffee, looking out over the city skyline. I had built everything from the ground up, and I had done it without them. No more guilt. No more chasing people who never valued me. No more making excuses for their behavior. And no regrets. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't ruining them. It's moving on, and never looking back. Peace. That's what it felt like. Not triumph, not revenge, just peace. For the first time in my life, I was free from my family's manipulation, from the endless cycle of guilt and obligation, and it felt damn good. I woke up in my own home, a modern loft in the city, bought entirely with my money, not the stolen inheritance they had finally repaid. No toxic family texts, no guilt-tripping phone calls, no pressure to play the perfect daughter in a family that had never valued me. I had finally built a life where I came first. And the best part? I didn't miss them. My parents had lost everything. The house they had once prided themselves on, sold. The lavish lifestyle they had built on my inheritance, gone. They now lived in a small rental house in a neighborhood they would have scoffed at before. And Alice? Alice had been forced to get a real job. She was no longer the carefree influencer with a glamorous lifestyle funded by stolen money. No more yoga retreats in Bali. No more lavish vacations. Just a basic office job, the kind she had once mocked me for having. The poetic irony wasn't lost on me. One afternoon, as I was leaving my office, I saw an unfamiliar number pop up on my phone. I normally ignored unknown calls, but something in my gut told me to answer. Emily, it's Mom. I stopped in my tracks. It had been a full year since I last heard her voice. I just wanted to talk, she continued, her tone softer than I had ever heard before. We miss you. I almost laughed. They missed me. They didn't miss me when they were stealing my inheritance. They didn't miss me when they cut me out of Christmas. They didn't miss me when they tried to ruin my reputation for exposing them. They missed control. They missed having me as their emotional punching bag. I don't think you miss me, I said calmly. There was silence on the other end. Then a deep sigh. Emily, we just want to move past all of this. We're still family. Family. That word meant nothing coming from her. We should meet for dinner, she continued, as if a meal could erase everything they had done. Just to talk. I took a slow breath. Mom, I said, my voice steady. You made your choice. Now, you have to live with it. But I hung up. And for the first time ever, I didn't feel guilty. After that call, I sat down with my journal, a habit I had picked up in therapy. Writing helped me untangle my emotions, helped me process everything I had been through. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote one simple sentence. I don't owe them anything, and I meant it. For so long, I had tried to earn their love, but now, I finally understood. I never needed it in the first place. The next few months were some of the happiest of my life. I reconnected with old friends, people I had pushed away because my toxic family took up too much emotional energy. I traveled to places I had always dreamed of going, not because I was running away, but because I finally had the freedom to go wherever I wanted. I poured myself into my career, launching my own consulting business. a move that terrified me at first, but turned out to be the best decision I ever made. And slowly, I rebuilt the life I should have always had. One evening, months after my mother's call, I received one final letter in the mail. No return address, just my name, written in familiar handwriting. It was from Alice. I debated whether to even open it, but curiosity won. Inside was a long, rambling letter about how she had lost everything, how she was struggling, how she wished things had turned out differently. But what stood out most? There was no apology. Not once did she take responsibility for what she did. Not once did she say she was sorry for how she treated me. Instead, she wrote about how hard it was for her now, how she wished we could go back to how things used to be. I almost felt bad for her, but then I remembered. She had never felt bad for me. I folded the letter neatly. Then, without hesitation, I dropped it into the trash. That was the closure I needed, because I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their guilt. I didn't need them. 1 year after everything happened, I found myself standing on my balcony, overlooking the city, a glass of wine in my hand. Not as the forgotten daughter, not as the family's doormat, but as someone who had finally reclaimed her life. And I smiled, because in the end, they lost everything. And I had gained more than I ever imagined, not just my inheritance, not just financial security, but peace. And that was worth more than anything. One of the most powerful lessons from Age 9 is the importance of self-worth and setting boundaries, especially when it comes to family. Many people are raised to believe that family is everything, that we must tolerate mistreatment simply because of shared blood. But the truth is, family is not defined by DNA, but by respect, love, and mutual support. Emily's story teaches us that when people, whether family, friends, or colleagues, consistently devalue and manipulate us, we are not obligated to keep them in our lives. Cutting toxic ties is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of self-preservation and empowerment. Another crucial lesson is knowing your worth. For years, Emily allowed herself to be treated as an afterthought, believing that if she just worked harder, sacrificed more, and proved herself, she would earn her family's love. But love that must be earned is not love at all. True self-worth comes from within, not from the approval of those who refuse to see our value. Ultimately, this story is about freedom. Freedom from manipulation, guilt, and the need for validation from people who never truly cared. And that is a lesson worth holding on to. Your peace is worth more than their approval.